Thank you everyone for being here. I'd like to welcome you to the third session in our Driving Value series. Today's event is going to be around driving functional effectiveness in a subscription business. This panel discussion is brought to you by Renewed, the open network for specialized subscription, membership and event professionals. My name is Sue Stevens and I'm the Executive Director for Renewed Europe. Some quick housekeeping notes. Please keep yourself on mute to minimize background noise. Feel free to have your videos on or off, whatever you're more comfortable with, but it would be great to see some faces. If you have questions for any of today's speakers, you can submit them throughout the session by using the chat function. After the presentation, you'll have access to the recording and we'll send you an email with the link once that's available online. On to today's session, I'd like to introduce you to our host, Julian Turner, and I'm going to let Julian introduce himself and the rest of the panel. So, Julian, over to you.
Thanks, Sue, and welcome everybody. Yes, my name is Julian Turner. I work across a few different businesses in Renewed, including The Day and also Academy. And generally, they are all subscription businesses, all with a very strong subscription or membership element. And this question of functional effectiveness is absolutely critical in terms of maximizing the value of those businesses. So it's really great to be here with our panel, and I'm going to introduce them. And if you could just each introduce yourselves and just say a little bit about your business to give you context for everyone listening and watching. So John, why don't you start?
Thanks, Julian. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. I'm John Waller. I'm founder and MD of SCI. We're a niche financial information platform based in London, but with customers in Europe and in the US in the main, and a few further afield these days as well. We're a sort of classic Renewed business mix, I guess, between subscriptions and events. We're about 2/3 revenue-wise subscriptions and about 1/3 in events, and using all sorts of different tools these days to try and pursue more growth. But yeah, looking forward to the webinar today, and I'll pass on to Katy, hand the baton on.
Hi, I'm Katy Rose. I am currently the MD and CRO of Exile Group. But for today's webinar, I'm going to take my old hat from last year, which was I'm the head of our intelligence product, which is our subscription. Our subscription is currently about 20% of our total revenue. Our target for this year is to change that so that it's 25% of the total revenue. And we are fundamentally a data, news, research and training platform for people within, well, our clients are bankers, lawyers within export finance, project finance, development finance and commodity finance. But the value of our platform is essentially like a deal making origination tool. So we help them drive new business and we help and support the process, their deal making process from start to finish.
Matt.
Yeah, rounding us off. So I'm Matt Louie. I'm with Columbia Books, otherwise known as CBIS, and I'm the Chief Revenue Officer. Been with them for about 3.5 years and located in Washington, D.C. CBIS, we own several companies, like everybody else had said, focused on specialty publications or niche industries. Some examples are federally regulated organizations such as grant recipients, FDA regulations, or energy regulations. We also have some customer segments focused on associations and American politics. And so most of our brands also have a combination of revenue streams, so subscription and data sales, and then events. About 2/3 of the revenues from the subs and the data, and about 1/3 is from an event. So that's a 50-50 split between event registrations and sponsorships. So enjoyed, or thanks for the invite and looking for the discussion.
Great. Thanks, everybody. So we're going to start off by just looking at some of the areas of potential friction when you have a subscription business that is part of a broader business with multiple revenue streams, and all of those revenue streams have got different characteristics in terms of investment, in terms of length of time to get to cash profit, in terms of long-term profitability and value, and so on. So I'm just interested to know, each of you, how you start to reconcile those different frictions. In particular, let's start with thinking about the competing demands of growth and long-term value. Matt, you've probably got more different revenue streams than anyone here. How do you go about trying to meet those different competing demands in your business?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all serve masters, and you know, so sometimes the board will say, "Hey, I really need some top line growth, or I need increased profitability." And while we all on this call know that there is some long-term value and more value for the organization as well, and that subscription revenue, I mean, sometimes we just need to go out and get revenue. But I think you know, marrying up and dealing with that friction, you can be intentional about how it leads back to the profitability and the long-term value. So I'll give you an example from our business. So we have an events team, and you know, while they put on several types of different events through the year, and some of them are charged, they also put on several subscriber-only events a year. And so these are member-only events. They increase subscriber satisfaction, but they also, in turn, are serving as a pipeline for new subscriptions. And you'd be amazed at the amount of people who register for these events, even when it says members only. And so it's become that pipeline. So I'll give you an example of one in particular. So we have an organization called CU Update, and the top level subscription in that is a executive level CEO only, invite only membership group. And so we target around 150 to 175 CEOs, but big CEOs. And so we created a dinner series last year's and put in some really high value topics. So like mergers and acquisitions, diverging beliefs between members and staff, talking about global expansion, really limited the sponsors in the room to allow robust discussion, and then you know, promoted the crap out of it using LinkedIn to create some FOMO, and it just really became a hot ticket. And so I would say, like, this alone has led to that subscription from people just signing up and then being told, like, no, you can't come unless unless you join the group. Almost a 10% increase in that subscription alone. And so I think you can do both. I mean, there's the friction, right? I need the events. I might need the extra dollars for sponsorships, but long term, it can also play into the profitability and the long-term value for your organization.
Great. Yeah. I mean, John, for you, but business owner, it's everything all at once, all the time, isn't it? Well, how do you manage? How do you manage the competing demands for resources in your business?
I think over the last 4 or 5 years, especially as we've come to understand a little bit more about what our customers really want from us and how we can satisfy those needs, I think there's been a growing realization for me and for the management team that the friction between, let's say, a subscriptions effort and an events effort, really, it's got to be an holistic perspective, simply because there's a very simple dynamic, I think, that we've witnessed, whereby the more people that come to your events, you know, you're providing the kind of living manifestation of your brand in an event. You're allowing people to network together. They're experiencing the brand firsthand, and they're going to be, that's the best possible marketing funnel in some respects for your subscription business. So even though that's fast cash, if you like, and the subscriptions cash is a slower burn, which requires, you know, a multi-year effort, I think, you know, backing those events with really high quality people and venues and partners and so forth is a even though perhaps an investor at the end of the day might put a low multiple on that. Excuse me, that's my phone going off. You're still seeing at the end of the day, a great marketing funnel for the subscriptions business. So yes, there's friction in terms of where you're going to invest and who wants cash to expand those different areas. But to answer your question, as a business owner, I see them both going in tandem for those reasons. As long as you have, I mean, the one caveat, right? You have to have a very joined up editorial principle here that the editorial output, as far as we're concerned, matches the events, the output of the events, and everything that goes into that as well. So that's how we view it in simple terms, I think.
And Katy, you've got this fantastic dual perspective now, because you've had both. You've been at both ends of this. You've both been the head of intelligence, and now you're in the MD role. Do you think you have a different perspective on it as MD from the perspective you had when you were head of intelligence?
It's certainly broadening my perspective. I would say, look, I started the business. I've always sat on the board, so the event revenue has always been our bread and butter, and so you have to look after that because and you have to care about it. But the one shift that we made was the decision to include, within our subscription, some event benefits. So we made sure that we had discounts to our events. We made sure that when our subscribers were at our events, they were sort of treated like VIPs. So we used the events to gain more subscribers, and we knew already before we even started that sort of 30% of our subscription base were event attendees, so were event accounts. So we knew there was a link anyway, and so it's important. There is friction, but it's also important to acknowledge both sides are really, really important. So I agree with the others on that.
How do you achieve a strategic alignment? Because I guess that's the key thing in the end, is you've got to have everybody working on the same page, working to the same strategy, shared goals. How do you go about, Katy, ensuring that's the case in your business at all levels?
Yeah, so look, I came into the head of intelligence role in 2023. At that point, before that, I'd sort of been in events, and the one thing I realized was how unstrategically aligned the subscription team were with the board, with the rest of the company, and so the setting clear KPIs was just the most important thing that I did in that year. And it was only 6, and it wasn't like massive, huge steps, like we need to grow by this amount. And it was like, I knew how we needed to grow. I knew based on our previous churn rates, based on our previous uplifts, I'd done all the metrics. So I knew we could grow to the 20%. But what we did was we did small KPIs that appealed to both the product. So the product team knew how they could support and how they could grow with their KPIs. And then there were commercial KPIs, but again, small ones, uplift minimums, proposal rates, a bit of pricing, just being a bit clever with our pricing. So we didn't make huge, like massive strategic points that they needed to hit, because I don't know about everybody else, but product and commercial teams in subscriptions are completely different characters. Like every person is completely different. So, and they all have different reasons for being in their jobs. And so it's like, you can't have these massive commercial KPIs for a product team that just want to write stories, So it's like, how can we help them at that level understand how they can help the commercial team ultimately?
Yeah,
So
sorry, Katy, go on. Yeah.
No, so I was just going to say, so we had the strategy, we had the presentation in place, we delivered it, no word of a lie, 4 times before the year even started. And then it was like repeat, every single month, every single meeting. Why are you doing that? Does it fit one of the KPIs? If not, don't do it. Just don't do it. So there was a lot of that, me shouting, basically.
Sounds quite a lot like parenting, I was going to say, but obviously except for the shouting part, but which I never do. Matt, how does that ring true with you in terms of achieving alignment?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with everything Katie said. I mean, just a couple other things. I think, meeting monthly as a leadership team to talk about the needs of the business and prioritize those resources, ensure that the highest impact projects get worked on first. I think that's something that's really been helpful for us is because, like you want to avoid fiefdoms and everybody has priorities and they want it, but coming together and aligning in agreement makes it a lot easier to say like, okay, maybe my priority isn't number one this month, and we need to work on this instead. And so, I mean, that would be my one addition is just that alignment between the leadership team.
Yeah, yeah. John, is that the same for you?
Yeah, I think there's a number of tactics that we've stumbled across over the years, which have worked quite nicely. So if you're putting on, we put on, I don't know, 7 or 8 events a year with awards as well on top, and now we do the networking events for subscribers as well, which has gone down pretty well. But 6-9 months out, when we're looking at an event, we will immediately, the first thing we do is engage the editorial team. We get the events team to talk to editorial and say, right, what are what's the hot button issue of the day? How is this agenda going to be shaped? Can you come back to me in 10 days time with a draft agenda? And you immediately get that buy-in as well from the editorial team in that way. And they will also be tasked with putting together an independent committee made up of experts in the industry to help shape, the agenda even more. So I think that kind of fostering that cross company buy-in on the event side is super important. And we do there's a very similar mechanism between editorial output and subscription sales as well, in terms of those guys having a pretty high cadence in terms of meeting, understanding who editorial's talking to, what's changing in the industry, who sales are seeing coming in, and where interest is being piqued. So I think it's all about those regular meetings, but not just that. It's making sure that people are kind of bought into the other side of, just through communication, really bought into both sides of the business, whether it be commercial or the output side. And that dynamic is one we're quite careful in nurturing and deepening as time goes on. And we don't like it when we miss one of those meetings, because people are starting to feel like they're out of touch with the other side of the business as well. So I think that's one way of fostering a kind of culture of communication internally, which has been quite nice to witness.
What do you think are the most difficult teams to get aligned, to get working off the same page?
Well, yeah, that's a bit of a half volley, but I think obviously revenue and editorial, sales and editorial traditionally. I mean, I used to work for, I won't mention the name, when I was this is a long time ago, 30 years ago, I worked for a company where it was a big successful B2B publisher and events organizer. We were the sales was based in Surrey and editorial was based in Waterloo. I mean, what on earth was that about? We didn't know half the people's names, So and when we did meet at company parties, there was, who were those guys over there? It was like the boys and schools, the boys and girls at the school disco back in the day. Never the twain shall meet. So, you've got to get over that dynamic, and you've got to get together. So I think I can't remember your question now, Julian, but I think that, as I say, getting together in that regard is super important.
The hardest teams to get aligned. Yeah, Katie.
Yeah.
Sounds like that slightly rang true with you as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's always content and sales. I mean, the one thing that we did, which I think really helped, was we really encouraged the sales team and the customer success team to get the product guys and the editorial guys onto calls with customers. I thought that because actually it's really nice for these people to hear what is being said about the work that they're doing and the sort of feedback in live feedback. But also it's great for the customer, because if they have any questions about the content that maybe the salesperson can't answer, they've got the backup of, you know, people who are really who really understand and are specialists in the industry. So we did a lot of work around that, and also a lot of work of, you know, we have these Monday morning meetings where we would talk about those that were churning, or we were worried about churning, or those that were renewing, and making sure that editorial were engaging with them on a content level as well. And then the same with editorial and data, you know, just small, tiny changes. When you're talking about a deal, make sure you link that to the deal page within the product, so you're pulling all the parts of the product together. It's really tiny changes that make all the difference.
Yeah, and as the products that we sell become more complex, more sophisticated from a content point of view, then that relationship between the content team and the sales team is just all the more important, isn't it? There's an interesting question in the chat about whether there are different risk appetites required across events businesses and subscriptions businesses. You know, and I think that speaks a little bit to the nature of the people that you put in to run those businesses or run those elements of the businesses. And I was wondered if any of you have had experience of people crossing over from one area to another area, and therefore bringing with them a slightly different perspective, different skill set, you know, a different kind of way of looking at things, which actually helps to broaden the understanding of the business. Matt, what's your experience of sort of the different kinds of risk appetites that you get in running events businesses and subscriptions businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's probably a little bit more appetite on the events to take some risks, and certainly, I mean, you know, it's a lower term investment. If you run an event and it's not successful, then, you know, you can do away with it and try something else, versus you make a change to your subscription product and your website and your management. It's like those are long-term impacts. I can use the example of I can think of somebody on one of our publications who was in marketing and then went over to the editorial, and so I thought it's actually been brilliant. He's been pushing the envelope and thinking through, you know, we probably all use some sort of newsletter or free newsletter to bring in and get some eyes and get it down the pipeline towards the subscription product. But really thinking about like engagement within the article placement and the redesigning of that. And so I thought he was really really adventurous in taking those risks. And now he's starting to think about like, well, how do I use these newsletters in social or LinkedIn? And so I think, you know, you find the right person, right appetite, there is going to be some learning, but they can do a great job at it and really move forward in the needle. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
I just wanted to add as well, sort of coming over from the being intelligence only over to the events team as well. One thing I've really brought with me is the importance of customer success. And I think on a subscription, you just wouldn't run a subscription without a customer success team. But then you think, well, why would you run an events business and why would you have all that event revenue without customer success? And so we've brought that over now, and they are sort of customer success / networking concierge. But I'm really interested to see the impact of them now covering both products over the next year. I think being able to deliver those ROI conversations, not only to our subscribers, but to our sponsors, I think that will make a huge dent in the event revenue ultimately as well.
That's a beautiful segue into customer success, is that it's such a critical area. I mean, in terms of operational effectiveness, it's probably the area where there is the most value to be gained in terms of improving effectiveness. John, I'd be interested to hear how have your thoughts evolved over time in terms of that customer success role, and what its importance, what the necessary qualities are, what good looks like, how's your view evolved?
I think it's clearly absolutely essential. I agree with Katie entirely. We've come to customer success, actually, that actual function being managed quite late in the day, actually. But we've seen that, a huge difference in the business because of it. I think you've also got to define what is the function of customer success. Customer success. What are these people tasked with? Is it feedback from customers? Is it checking in with customers? Is it ensuring they're using the product? Is it ensuring the team is using the product? If you're looking for, if you're looking for really honest, true, nitty-gritty feedback from your customers in terms of not what you're doing right, which is great, but actually what you're doing wrong and where you need to improve. I went out for a breakfast meeting with a good friend of the company who decided last year not to renew. And I sat down with them. We were there for about 2 hours, and she told me chapter on verse what we'd done wrong. And it was an incredibly valuable couple of hours of my life spent. And I said, "Why haven't we heard this from you before? What this is all news to me." She goes, "Well, it's very, very difficult to tell this to your salespeople or indeed your editorial staff, because it's quite sensitive information." And I said, "But you feel okay saying it to me?" And she goes, "Well, yeah, I don't know who else to tell you, but I think we have a good relationship. But you're the owner of the business. You need to hear this stuff." Yeah. And I just thought, wow, that was a real moment of epiphany. Really, who's going to go out and get the valuable stuff, right? So I think customer success is there to do that job, but possibly mainly to sort of look for red flags in an account before it becomes problematic. Maybe it's a 3-monthly check-in. Are people using the product? If not, why not? And encourage them to do, to get back on it. Yeah. They may have opted out of the news by accident, out of news alerts, who knows? But I think defining the various functions of what customer success should be fulfilling for you is super important. And also understanding how you're going to get really good feedback on the product, which you then reiterate and improve and double down on going forward. So there may be different functions within the company that you look at to fulfill those needs as well. And that's been my learning over the last sort of year and a half of really embracing this, I think.
And the skills that you need in that role. I mean, I think back 20, 30 years to in those days what would have been called a customer services team, and the nature of the person that would be running a customer services team. And it would be typically people coming from an administrative background, or with a sort of they perhaps had a particular capacity for systems and processes and so on. But this is what we're talking about now, what you're describing there, is very, very demanding. It's a totally different skill set in terms of that depth of understanding and relating that to the development of the products. I mean, Matt, what are you looking at now in terms of when you're what does a really great customer success person look like now?
My apologies, I was on mute. Yeah, I think, that's one of the things I'm actually focused on now, and I think about it a lot in terms of gaining the feedback this year or so. I think there's a couple things. One, I want to make it somewhat easier for them. So we're trying to figure out some KPIs, and I think we've got some isolated on what kind of triggers would create higher risk renewals, or what could signify, as being high risk for renewal. And then we're working on scripting out the touch points throughout the year, and the talking points through them. We realize that, this smaller group is really in. So I think that's it. But I think one of the things that I'm really thinking about with this change is the flexibility. So there are going to be a host of reasons why it's not working. And so I need that person to be nimble and flexible and just understand and process all those reasons. And sometimes we don't have the answer, and we just need to come back and share that with the team and think about it together. And so I would say those are some of the key traits that we're looking for.
Yeah, and getting those sort of clear roles and responsibilities in there as well. Just to be there's things that can so easily fall through the cracks now, because in a way, retention often used to be perceived as being the job of the renewal sales team or the customer services team, or a particular group of people, but it can't be like that anymore, can it? Surely it's got to be much broader responsibility than that.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we look at the customer success more on as like a strategic partner to the client. So, somebody who is totally there to support the client and make sure that all the objectives that the client has said from the beginning that they want to achieve by the end of the year or 2 year or however long the contract is, and to make sure that they're delivering those and be ahead of it, be proactive, not reactive. So that's been a key part of the customer success role for us.
Yeah. Katy, tell us, lift the lid a little bit more on your war room meetings, on the that you alluded to earlier. What goes on there? How does the voice of the customer come through to you?
Yeah, so those Monday meetings, I mean, they're not always like this, but they are every single Monday at 9:30, and the heads of every department within the subscription turn up. And we are there for everybody to talk about what does the team need to know about what is happening on the field this week. And it is like the only way to make sure that we are not missing a beat, because there were so many times when I was like, God, there's people talking all over the place to different clients about God knows what. And it's like, we all need to just be saying the same thing. So those Monday meetings are about what we're doing that week. What are we saying? What are the objectives? Are we going to achieve them? And it's every Monday morning. And I literally only miss them if I'm on holiday.
And how about the how does the customer voice come back to you through that? So that's what you've described sounds like, making sure that your messaging out is really aligned.
Sorry, that is actually what the war room is for, is to make sure that our messaging out is the same. In terms of customer feedback, we have struggled with this, but we genuinely use the basic sort of Slack chat. I think we have product updates where we do a monthly check-in where customer success and sales will sit with the product team and talk about the feedback that we've received. And we have a feedback loop on email. There is constant feedback coming back to the development team, and we basically in the last few months sort of set up this NPD where we now, all the product stuff all the feedback that we've got goes to the head of content now, who is also our sort of product guy, and he puts that into the product plan. And then that is sort of fed back to customers about when they can expect these changes, when will they get these updates.
Yeah.
It doesn't always work to plan, but
yeah,
I mean, getting better.
when I was at Healthcare Business International, we just had to systemize it. Doing it informally, just on the anecdotally, just didn't work. And you just trying to put in systems to make sure that customer voice is captured and recorded, and every comment is so useful, and sometimes people in one role may not see the full value of that comment, particularly if it's a little bit negative. When in a different role, you can see that. So getting the content people to engage with the customer success people to hear and discuss what the customers mean by this comment. That was a bit of a breakthrough for us, I think. But you had to build into the systems. What
I
about
think
you?
also, I was going to say, I think going back to that thing about cross-fertilizing culture and ensuring people are talking to each other in a constructive manner, you know, it's with Slack, for example, we'll have a channel for almost every side of thread of content that we produce. So if sales hear that somebody's left their role, they'll probably hear it sooner than editorial does, and we would just quickly drop that into the Slack channel. And you're helping journalists do their job a little bit better, a little bit easier. You're giving them some minutes back in the day, and that really, I think that really helps foster that culture of respecting each other's roles, especially when perhaps some of the harder feedback comes back in. Actually, you only produced, you know, for example, 6 stories on this particular topic last week, whereas the competition produced 10. Like, what's going on, guys? Come on, you've got to up your game. Because sales look at those metrics the whole time, because that's what they're hearing from their customers, their would-be customers, the whole time. So I think you have to you have to ensure that teamwork is very, very much alive. And it's I love the war room on a Monday morning, and I think that needs to be, you know, we have what we call upstairs downstairs meetings here on a weekly basis, but I think you need that continuous communication throughout the week, just to make sure things aren't missed, but also that people understand that everyone's trying to help each other out. Obviously, it's not always the case, but I think it's a really important dynamic, you know, to protect.
There's I can see so many people in this meeting with great expertise in this. So please, if you've got thoughts on ideas for improving the effectiveness of customer feedback, customer success, getting the customer voice in the organization, please stick them in the chat, and we'll round up some later. We'll come back to this, but in the meantime, let's move over to the sales side, and just talk about how we organize ourselves to attract new customers. It would be really good just to hear from you how each of you organize your sales teams in terms of those the different products that you're selling. Do you have separate teams for subscriptions and events? Do you have separate teams for new sales and renewal sales? How do you organize it? John, why don't you start?
Yeah, of course. So we have for subscription sales for new business, we have a team of 3 selling into clients, and split the market evenly between them. We also have now a sales development rep who's kind of a new guy. He wants to get into sales, just really looking for new opportunities. So there's a team of 4 there, if you like. Then we have on the existing accounts business, we have an accounts manager there supported by customer success, and they work as a partnership. So we very much see those 2 dynamics working together, but subtly separately as well. And it's kind of similar on the event side, although it's slightly less well defined in terms of new business and accounts. It's done really event by event. But we are thinking at the moment of how to better. I think you can. I love the idea of accounts and new business, simply because those different incentives, those different drivers, mean that you're less likely to, I think, miss opportunities. So we're looking at potentially a similar dynamic in our events business now. That kind of gives you a clue of, you know, traditionally how we see ourselves traditionally as more of a content subscriptions business, but we wanted to, you know, we do want to treat events super seriously for reasons set out earlier. So I think there'll be some changes there over the next few months, but yeah, a lot's given to that dynamic between new business and nurturing the existing business, you know.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point you raised, actually, about is the implication what you're saying that you're thinking of having a new sales and a renewal sale in the events business as well as in the subscriptions business? Is that what you're saying? Moving that kind of concept of a sort of renewal to,
I mean, having sort of learning on the experience of new people coming to the business over the last couple of years, and then understanding what's worked well for people in the past, you know, learning from other business models. And I think, for us, delegate sales is a big part of our revenue piece now, over the last few years. And having someone working existing accounts on delegates, and then someone working on new business is something we're looking to bring in this year, as well as on sponsorship as well. And we talked about this in the prep call a little bit, but you're hiring very different personalities often for these different roles. New sales versus, the SDR we brought in. I said, "Do you want to work with the accounts team?" He goes, "No, absolutely not. I'm a new business guy. I love it. I love finding new opportunities." So even digging down into, new versus renewals, never mind events versus delegates versus sponsorship versus subscriptions, it's a really important dynamic to try and, identify where the best talents lie,
Katy, how do you organize your teams?
So we have a subscriptions team that sell on renewals and new business. Each of them have they actually have the way that we do it to ensure that they do focus their time on new business as well as on renewals and don't depend on that uplift conversation all the time is we actually commission them separately. So they do both, but they're commissioned separately, so they have separate targets and you can't eat into each part in order to hit your targets. And I felt that has really helped. That really helped us last year to get to the number we needed to get to, the growth number we needed to get to. On the event side, it's completely separate. The two sales teams are completely separate. They do both as well. And recently we've been because, as I said, our accounts cross over quite a lot. We've teamed up so that it's not too complicated for the client, but there will be two salespeople often in a call. One, because I feel like the salespeople and the way that they deliver the value on subscriptions is just a whole different sale to events. And actually, I don't think it should be, but that is just the sort of old-fashioned way of selling events, is very feature-focused, whereas on the sub side, they're really good at selling the value. And so I put them together, hopefully to sort of learn from each other as well. And that's working quite nicely because it means that when you go to proposal point, nobody's willing to drop the value either side. So it makes for an interesting negotiation with the client.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. I have to say, I've always found it really difficult in a subscription sales team to maximize both new business and also retention at the same time. If it's the same people working on both, that there's a sort of, at times it's sort of, the new business gets left or sort of undercooked a little bit. And other times people are attracted to the new business and they don't maximize the renewal. But I've always ended up having to split them in the end. That I don't know, Matt, where do you stand on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of what you said. So our business is split up into different groups as well. So new sales in terms of subscriptions, memberships, those are handled by one group. And let me just take a step back. I feel like the reason why they need to use split is personality type. So when I think about the new business, they generally like, little analogy hunters, and then that renewals, relationship management, customer success. I think of them more as farmers and nurturers, and same thing with like my partnership or sponsorship managers on the event side. I think about them similarly as well. But so the subscriptions is handled by one group of account executives. We also will use them for higher value events registrations, and you want to make sure the juice worth the squeeze. But I think about that as expanding average value of the customer value or what they're spending with you, and it also gives them a pipeline into. We also do personal or custom trainings, which are really high value and big dollars, and so it gives them a natural pipeline into prospecting for those. On the renewal side, typically we've had these farmers working on renewals. I'm tinkering with this year, giving back some of the really high risk renewals back to the sales team. I almost think I'm gonna test and see if it's almost like a resell, if that helps. And then on the partnerships or on the partnerships and sponsorships for events, we have a different person who kind of works with them on exposures and sponsorships and in advertising and publications. And so I think about them as like almost like account managers or working with a industry segment to really develop that stream.
There's a good challenge in the chat from Andy at Subscribe, where Andy's saying that if you get the elements right, if you get the measurement of customer outcomes right, and obviously your product's right, and your team is working effectively, then there shouldn't be a customer success department, because everybody's doing it. It's a kind of everyone is working for the growth of that subscription business. So it's a sort of, I think that there is, you can legitimately make the argument either way here. What do you make of his point? He said he says it shouldn't be necessary to have a customer success department.
Yeah, I broadly agree with Andy's point to an extent. I still think you need a champion for that, and you need those mechanical, process-driven check-in points for the client. We do it on a quarterly cadence now. For me, I just find the idea of losing customers terrifying. So I want to see any red flags well before they come up. But to Andy's point, you've got to have sales feeding back into editorial, into content the whole time. What's good, what's bad, what's failed, where they see improvements could lie, and that loops back into the thing about a really healthy cross culture between content and sales. That content takes that seriously. The criticism comes in and they go, actually, decent point. Thank you for outlining that, and also ideas for really positive improvements as well. So yeah, every single person in the business is a customer success manager, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah, and let's just get into a little bit on systems and processes and measurement, because to get as what Andy's talking about there in terms of getting measurable customer results, you need good systems and processes, don't you? And isn't that is so often a challenge, getting things working effectively? What are you using? What are your key measures, Katy, in terms of the how you measure customer engagement, or how customers are viewing your products, and what are the systems and processes you use to ensure that?
Yeah, so we did quite a lot of work on this last year, because we brought in a head of customer success around sort of February time, and we implemented some. So basically, we look at what our customers are doing, the behavior of our customers, not just the subscribers, but we also have a sort of free access part of our platform that we've been able to prove has an impact on us, or they become subscribers. There's quite a nice link between that and the sale. So we do a lot of usage tracking of our newsletters, obviously, like everybody. We see which parts of the website people are most active. We look at where they jump off, where they jump on, all of that stuff. We have a Power BI dashboard, so we can look into the behaviors of each of our customers. What are they looking at? What are they not interested in? Because a lot of, we have a lot included in the subscription that isn't getting used, or maybe the customers don't know about. So there's a lot of looking at where they're not going as well, to make sure that we can show them that they have this. So yeah, for us, it's a dashboard. It's really intuitive. Our AI will have access to that soon, and as soon as the AI has access to that, that's going to be a game changer for us.
Matt, how are you measuring it? Yeah, sorry, John. Sorry, but you go ahead.
No, it's okay. I was just going to. I think a really important question that we're always encouraging people to ask of customers is, what's the purpose of our product in your company? Why have you bought this thing? What purpose does it fulfill for you? And secondly, is it satisfying those criteria that you put a lot of budget towards this? Are we doing a good job for you? And I think sometimes we get distracted by a lot of data. We get distracted by clicks and views and dwell time and this, that, and the other. And it gives you an aggregated view. Of course, it's really important. But again, getting down to the nitty-gritty of actually talking to a customer and saying, are we doing a good job? Like, are we fulfilling the role that you wanted us to fulfill? And if not, why not? And I often think you only actually need to speak to 6, 7, 8, 9 customers to get a really, really good sense of whether you're doing a good job across the industry, perhaps different personas as well within that peer group. But I think, and whose job is that? Is that sales, customer success, content, or is it the founder's job? I don't know. It's probably a little bit of everything. But I would highly recommend that, repeating that moment I had with my client last year. And I had many more afterwards, but that was such a moment of like, I've got to be the guy that's getting this, but they may not tell the salesperson or even the editor. So yeah, I think there are soft indicators, and then there's the data that supports it through GA or HubSpot or whatever tools you use. And we're a big HubSpot proponent. We put a lot of energy and IT resource into that as well, to making sure we track the right metrics.
Yeah. By the way, I should say that Andy has quite rightly pulled me up from overstating his point. Apologies, Andy. He said he's not saying that there should be no customer success department. It's just that it's not down to just one team. That's the point he's making. So apologies for that, Andy. That is absolutely understood. So Matt, yeah. So to talk to us about how you measure customer engagement and how you employ that in the business.
Yeah, so I think it's a kind of a mixture of both what Katie and Don said. I think first, you have some KPIs, like how frequently are they logging in, where are they logging in, how wide am I with them, meaning how many people in their organization also have access, and are they using it? We have multiple subscriptions on each of these brands, so are they buying other kinds of subscriptions and getting wide as well? I think those are it. But I also think, like, what John says, you got to get that feedback too. And like, so I'll give you an example. We have a grants line, Thompson Grants. And so, I could easily look at the numbers and say, well, this person's not logging in. But then if I do a little research, I find out, well, their grant expired, 4 months ago. They no longer manage a grant. And so, yeah, there's a reason why they're not logging in, right? They don't need it anymore. And so I think it's important to marry up both, right? You got to use those systems that you've created, but you also have to have that understanding and the conversation with the customer.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. There's an interesting comment from Ben Oakshott from the chat. He's talking about an alternative to having a customer success team is to just allocate fewer accounts per head to your account managers, so that you improve the quality of the relationships they have with their customers and its services, better understanding. I think that's also very interesting, because you don't want to have sort of these critical renewal sensitive relationships being handled by what's perceived to be a sort of a more junior team, or a sort of an isolated team. And I understand that point as well. I suppose part of it is that there's this role is actually gaining in importance and status through the company.
I think there's an element of continuity that's important as well within any one account. So, for example, our new sales team now, up until a certain threshold of revenue that they look after, they're allowed to account manage any accounts they originated from the previous year, because they've fostered a great relationship. And just to pass it on to the accounts team, I think sometimes the customer goes, well, I've really gotten really well with that guy, or, what's going on there? But also they understand the account really well, having spent so long onboarding them and getting them to commit in the first place. So, but to Ben's point, never overload people, get them to a certain point and then move the accounts across and, bring in new people. Absolutely. It's so important that, with higher value accounts, that you spend a lot of time nurturing and looking after. Yeah. And identifying red flags before they really become bad things. Yeah.
It's a really hard thing to do that. It's a hard thing to invest in that team ahead of the curve. But I think it's a great point. Look, the time has absolutely flown by, and I cannot believe that we are just a few minutes away from 5 p.m. in the UK. So I'm going to come around and ask you each for one final takeaway for everybody to take back to their businesses and implement tomorrow to improve the functional effectiveness of their subscriptions businesses. So one final nugget, and I'm going to spin the roulette wheel of fate, and I've come up with Matt first. Matt,
That's awesome. Thanks. Thanks for having me, first of all. I don't know. I was thinking going back to like what Katy had said. She talked about those staff meetings. And so, we also have them. But I think when you have them, it's really easy to get in those meetings and report on functional metrics without thinking about how it ties to organizational goals. So I think one of the things is like firm organizational goals that, go down to every department. And so, example, everybody's goal this year is retention, right? Now that may look different for editorial than it looks for sales, and their KPIs may be different. But if that's our overall goal and we're all achieving or trying to achieve that, when I'm coming to those meetings, I'm talking about it and how it relates to retention of my customers. And I think that helps, create a little bit more clarity and cohesion, and then everybody knows where they're going. They're rowing in the same direction. And I don't know. I just feel like it creates a little bit more culture. So that would be my one suggestion.
Great, thank you, Katy.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, as times are changing, like where I will probably focus a bit more of my attention is on working out a way to automate a lot of the stuff that we spend a lot of time on that probably we shouldn't be doing and doesn't need necessarily a human being to do, so that the human beings are then relinquished to actually do the customer feedback stuff and to actually have the conversations and be customer facing as much as possible. So I'd say sort of automation, and then, making sure that every user, the journey for every user is sort of as efficient and pleasant as possible.
Excellent. John.
What I wrote down here was hire great people with a lot of experience, get out of their way and let them do great stuff for you, which I absolutely endorse, and you should do that. But I think we've talked a lot about culture today, and I'm going to add a postscript to that, as well as hiring great people. Remove the really damaging people from your business. Either persuade them to leave or make them leave, because it's the most expensive thing is bringing in good people to the business. And if there are people in there who are just the wrong fit, or they're willfully or even unconsciously damaging the culture, then I think it's super important to tackle that head on. I really do.
Yeah, brilliant.
And thank you very much for inviting me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm going to throw in a bonus one right at the end, which is to build. But I want to build on the point you made earlier, John, about when you were talking about where the value lies in your subscription products, and you said, you always want to know, what is the customer using it for? What how are they actually using your information, your products in their business? And I think that's absolutely right. I'll just add that just thinking what they do next as well is really useful. So they use your product for this thing, but what's the next thing they do with that? What's the next layer in the decision chain? Where does that lead? What happens in their business as a result of using your products, and how can you influence that? And is there more value to be found there? So you're constantly trying to push the envelope in terms of the value that you're creating. I think that's I find a constant challenge.
Go and sit with the customer and see what they're doing. Just say, do you mind if I spend half an hour with you? What do you when you're using our product?
We did that at Sport Business. It was absolutely revelatory, actually. It was really great thing. We went around and spent a whole, the visits, significant length of time with 3 or 4 customers. It was really great. Brilliant. Look, thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for participating and for sticking it out. Thank you, Sue, for getting us all together. It's been really enjoyable. Thanks.
And thank you to you, Julian, John, Katy,
thanks, Julian.
and Matt. Enjoy the rest of your days, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Go ahead.